This is Rainy Night Horrors. Outside, the storm brews, and with it comes something darker. Every drop masks a sound, every shadow holds a shape. You're not imagining it. You're hearing the truth. Listen closely. It's already here. The gravel lot crunched under my tires, a sound too loud in the profound quiet surrounding Silas's diner. Empty, utterly empty, save for my dust-streaked sedan. A prickle of unease traced my spine, but 6 hours carving through Nebraska's endless cornfields on I-80 had left hunger gnawing louder than caution. The digital clock on the dash blinked 2:47 p.m. My gut echoed the sentiment, a low rumble that had been my companion for the last 100 desolate miles. Silas squatted low against the horizon, an island adrift in a sea of tasseled cornstalks. Above the door, a faded neon sign stuttered OPEN, its electric hum, a lonely insect against the vast afternoon silence. A tiny bell, tarnished brass, chimed my arrival into an atmosphere thick with the ghosts of stale coffee and fryer oil. Overhead, fluorescent tubes droned, bathing the tired cream walls and cracked crimson booths in a stark, unforgiving light. Along one wall stretched a counter, its chrome edge dulled, faced by a row of vacant, bolted-down stools, like silent sentinels. "Grab a seat," a voice rasped from the unseen kitchen, punctuated by the sharp hiss of fat hitting a hot flat top. I slid onto a stool at the counter, the red vinyl sign beneath me. My forearms found a faint tackiness on the formica. A minutiae, encased in plastic, yellowed, and peeling at the edges, lay waiting. From the back emerged a wiry man, maybe 50-something, his sparse gray hair slicked back, his white apron a canvas of indeterminate stains. A plastic badge, pinned askew, read Milo. "Coffee!" He didn't wait for an answer, already tipping a thick ceramic mug under the urn. "Yeah, please," came out gravelly, unused. The coffee arrived, a steaming blackness that promised and delivered a bitter, scorched flavor. Milo hovered, pencil poised over a pad. "Cheeseburger. Fries," I managed. "Got it." He vanished back through the swinging door. Silence resettled, thick and heavy, broken only by the drone of the lights and the distant sizzle from the kitchen. Then, a soft clearing of a throat, startlingly close. 2 stools down. I hadn't heard the bell chime again, hadn't registered any movement. Yet there he sat, an elderly gentleman, immaculate in a brown tweed jacket, the elbows reinforced with worn leather patches. Snow-white hair lay perfectly combed, and thin, wire-rimmed spectacles rested precisely on the bridge of his nose. "Good afternoon," he offered, a slight incline of his head. His voice was gentle, tinged with the soft edges of a southern accent. "Afternoon," I returned, surprised by the company in this vacuum. "Long haul?" he inquired conversationally. "Seems that way. Aiming for San Francisco." "Ah, new horizons?" "New job." Usually I kept to myself on the road, a self-contained unit, but his calm demeanor, the almost archetypal grandfatherly air, disarmed me. "A grand adventure then." "Excellent." A warm smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Made that trek myself. Heavens, must be 4 decades past. Different world then. Quieter roads, more spots like this fine establishment." He indicated our surroundings with a sweep of his hand. The aroma of grilling beef wafted from the kitchen, triggering another low growl from my midsection. "And yourself?" I asked, feeling the need to reciprocate. "What brings you through?" "Oh, just meandering. The gift of retirement, you see. Time to roam." A soft chuckle escaped him. "My dear Eleanor always claimed I had restless feet." "Eleanor?" "My wife. Lost her 5 years back. Cancer," he stated simply, without a tremor of sentimentality. "I'm very sorry." He offered a slight shrug. "Such is the tapestry, I suppose. We shared 42 wonderful years. No regrets there." Milo reappeared, setting down a plate with a decisive clink. Steam curled invitingly from a thick cheeseburger and a pile of golden fries. "Anything else for ya?" Milo asked. "This looks perfect, thanks." The old gentleman observed me lift the burger. "Milo runs a good grill," he commented. "Solid fare." One bite confirmed it. Juicy patty, perfectly molten cheese, a bun toasted to a satisfying crisp at the edges. "You weren't kidding," I mumbled through a mouthful. "Excellent." "Try the hot sauce with those fries," he suggested, nodding towards a nondescript bottle nearby, its label crudely handwritten, "Milo's Own." As I ate, he spun yarns, decades teaching history in Georgia, 3 children flung far by life's winds, the motorhome purchased post-retirement. His voice was a soothing balm, his anecdotes laced with wry humor and quiet wisdom. Slowly, the knots of tension from the long drive began to loosen in my neck and shoulders. During a lull, he asked, "Forgive me, I didn't catch your name." "Finn." "A pleasure, Finn. I'm Arthur." He extended a hand across the counter space between our stools. His grip was surprisingly strong, dry and cool. Arthur continued, painting verbal landscapes of hidden roadside gems, suggesting detours through forgotten scenic byways, reflecting on the slow erosion of small-town America he'd witnessed over the years. I polished off the burger, moved on to the fries. Crisp exterior, yielding to fluffy potato within. Milo's Own sauce delivered a pleasant, vinegary heat. "How long have you been on this particular wonder?" I asked Arthur. He paused, gazing thoughtfully at the counter. "Let's see. Left Atlanta around the 1st, so about a fortnight now. Quite a stretch. Time flows differently without a timetable, Finn. Every day holds the promise of Sunday morning." He smiled faintly. I saw his coffee mug sat empty beside him. "Another coffee?" I offered, gesturing towards the urn. "No, thank you kindly. Best be moving along shortly myself." Just then, Milo emerged, wiping grease from his hands onto his apron. "All good here?" "Excellent," I confirmed. "Could I settle up?" Milo gave me a slightly puzzled look. "Settle up for?" "My meal, burger and fries." "Ah, right." He scribbled on his pad. $12.50. I pulled out my wallet. "And add his coffee to that, please," I said, nodding towards Arthur's stool. Milo's brow furrowed. "His coffee? Whose?" "Arthur's. The gentleman sitting—" I gestured. The stool was vacant. The coffee mug was gone. A sudden cold clarity hit me. The diner was utterly silent again, populated only by Milo and myself. "Friend," Milo said, his voice flat, "you're the only soul who's walked through that door since noon." The space where Arthur's mug had rested was smooth, empty for Micah. Only my plate and mug remained. "No, that can't be right." An old man, Arthur, tweed jacket, white hair. We were just talking. Milo shook his head, a slow, deliberate motion. Been keeping an eye out from the kitchen. Ain't seen hide nor hair of anyone but you. Been sitting right there, talking to yourself over that burger, far as I could tell. A knot tightened in my gut, the excellent burger suddenly turning to lead. But we spoke for ages about his wife, Eleanor, Georgia, teaching. My voice trailed off, sounding thin even to my own ears. Mister, you all right? Milo's expression shifted to one of mild concern. Long drive can play tricks. Maybe sit tight a minute. My hands trembled as I fished out $15, dropping it on the counter. Keep it, I mumbled, needing air, needing escape. The tarnished bell above the door gave a frantic little jingle as I burst outside. Sunlight assaulted my eyes, painfully bright after the diner's gloom. My car waited, solitary in the vast gravel expanse. Keys slipped through my clumsy fingers, clattered on the stones. Retrieving them, I scrambled into the driver's seat, turned the ignition. Pulling back onto the interstate, a glance in the rearview mirror showed Silas's diner shrinking, its feeble neon sign a fading pulse against the cornfields. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, a cold sweat prickling my skin despite the car's AC. I pushed the needle past the limit, fleeing west as the Nebraska sun bled orange across the endless rows of corn. Had I hallucinated? Was this some bizarre fatigue-induced fugue? But the reality of it clung to me. Arthur's gentle southern cadence, the specific details. Eleanor, gone 5 years, leaving Atlanta on the 1st. The feel of his handshake, cool and firm. At the first glimmer of civilization, a small town huddled around a gas station, I pulled off. Inside, under buzzing fluorescent lights, unnervingly similar to the diners, I grabbed a local paper. October 15th. My fingers, clumsy and slick, fumbled with my phone. Atlanta obituaries, October 2019. The search felt morbid, desperate. Then, scrolling, I found it. Dated October 15th, 5 years ago, exactly. Arthur Pendleton, 72, esteemed educator and cherished family man, passed away peacefully. October 15th, 2019. Retired history teacher, 42 years of marriage, 3 children, avid traveler. The accompanying photograph showed a man with neatly combed white hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a kind smile, wearing a familiar tweed jacket with leather elbow patches. The phone slipped from my nerveless grasp, hitting the grimy linoleum with a sharp crack. The gas station lights hummed their incessant drone. My own reflection, caught in the darkened window, stared back, pallid, eyes wide with disbelief. Night had fallen swiftly, pressing thick against the glass. The highway waited, a ribbon of darkness spooling out towards an unseen horizon. Arthur's words echoed, just meandering, passing through. Back in the car, the engine idled, a low thrum against the sudden silence. Headlights swept past on the interstate, alien and distant. Driving further tonight felt impossible. I retrieved the phone, dialed the number for a motel sign I'd glimpsed. Sleep wouldn't come easily, not with Arthur's gentle voice still resonating in my memory, recounting tales from a journey that had concluded precisely 5 years ago, this very day. Not while the phantom pressure of his handshake lingered on my palm, a handshake that occurred at a counter where, According to Milo, I had been utterly alone. A tired voice confirmed a room. Driving the short distance, my eyes kept flicking to the rearview mirror, scanning the empty, lightless road behind me. Yet, a profound sense of not being alone settled over me. How many others, I wondered, had found solace in Arthur's company at Silas's diner on some lonely afternoon, the sole patron sharing stories with a man whose earthly travels had ceased half a decade before. The motel lot was bathed in the tired crimson glow of its vacancy sign. Tomorrow, the westward journey towards San Francisco, towards a new beginning, would resume. But tonight belonged to the impossible. Tonight required stillness, a reckoning with the spectral encounter in that desolate diner. Tonight, I would simply sit with the memory of Arthur Pendleton, the kindly ghost of the interstate, the stranger who was perhaps the most permanent resident Silas's diner ever had. Who anticipates that renting 4 walls and a concrete floor for storing lumber and tools could unravel into the most disquieting chapter of their existence? Not I. My needs were purely pragmatic. Overflow capacity for construction supplies, a dedicated zone for weekend tinkering free from noise complaints or domestic clutter. A sensible arrangement, or so it seemed. By day, the structure was utterly unremarkable, just an expansive, hollow shell lined with shelving units. Nightfall, however, painted it in entirely different hues. 3 months prior, the lease was inked. Mr. Henderson, the proprietor, presented as straightforward, vouching for the structure's integrity and mentioning a clean history with previous occupants. The rent felt equitable, the location convenient, a mere 15-minute drive from home. On that initial inspection, the primary access stood out, a wide, corrugated metal moor secured by a hefty padlock beneath a rolling shutter. Beyond it, a single corridor branched into parallel rows of towering steel shelves, each reaching some 7 feet skyward, carving narrow canyons between them. Memory paints that initial Saturday morning vividly. My pickup rumbled into the parking area. The padlock yielded, the shutter groaned upwards, and the hauling commenced. Bags of cement, cartons brimming with nails, weighty power tools, tangled extension cords, rough sawn wooden planks, the mundane inventory of my trade. Inside, flipping the switch near the entrance coaxed the overhead fluorescents into a low, resonant hum. They cast a cool, slightly sterile luminescence upon everything, a detail I scarcely registered then. It was merely a vast concrete expanse punctuated by steel skeletons, nothing more profound. I designated a corner for my tools, stacked scrap timber onto a lower shelf, and arranged the cement sacks near the entrance for accessibility. The plan involved returning the following day to embark on a modest woodworking venture. A couple of hours passed in assessment, drilling test holes, probing for stable surfaces, gauging airflow. Locking up that afternoon, nothing felt amiss. The place radiated normalcy. The first tremor of the uncanny arrived perhaps a week hence. Dinner concluded, I recalled a box of nails forgotten in the truck bed. Rather than ferry it indoors, a detour to the warehouse seemed simplest. It was 8 o'clock. The sun long surrendered to the horizon. I reached the unit, disengaged the lock, and stepped across the threshold. The light switch, conveniently placed, was my first touch point. The instant I actuated it, a faint clink, metallic and brief, echoed from the deeper recesses of the building, like something small tapping against steel. I paused, straining my ears. Silence resumed. A settling pipe, thermal contraction in the metal, rationalizations queued up, easily accepted. I navigated to the designated shelf, deposited the new box, performed a cursory check on my equipment, all present and correct. As I turned to depart, a distinct squeak pierced the quiet. I pivoted, scanning for a loose hinge, perhaps a metal rod precariously balanced. Again, only stillness answered. A shrug, a turn of the key, and I drove homeward, the minor anomalies fading. The subsequent weekend brought focused labor, constructing a small bench. Arriving mid-morning, around 10, I immersed myself in the familiar rhythm of measuring, sawing, and sanding. The entire day unfolded within those concrete confines, concluding near 6 in the evening, marked by a sense of accomplishment. Throughout those hours, no peculiar sounds, no unsettling undercurrents. A perfectly standard, productive session. Yet, that very evening, around 9, a prickle of unease surfaced. I'd neglected to secure one of my more valuable power tools within its cabinet. Precaution dictated locking away expensive gear, so back I went. The parking area lay steeped in shadow, sparsely illuminated by a solitary street lamp, bleeding light from the corner. The air possessed an unseasonal chill. Parking, retrieving my flashlight from the glove compartment, I entered. The warehouse lights flickered, hesitated, then held steady, and then I perceived it again, a metallic rasp, dragging, originating somewhere within the labyrinth of shelves. It conjured the image of a chain being drawn slowly across the concrete floor, a brief, grating slide. I froze, my pulse hammering against my ribs. Holding my breath, I listened intently. The sound ceased. Building settling, my mind insisted. Something shifting. I strode towards the tool cabinet, unlocked it, secured the drill, relocked it, consciously pushing the noise from my thoughts. Turning back towards the main door, it returned, louder this time. I halted abruptly. The scraping emanated distinctly from the third row of shelves. My flashlight beam sliced through the air, illuminating only the stark geometry of steel frames under the cold, fluorescent glare. No visible motion, no lurking shadows, but the sound was undeniable, sharp and grating, like a metal bar being dragged across the rough floor. My stomach constricted, my mouth felt instantly arid. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding thin in the vastness. "Anyone there?" Silence was the sole reply. Reason warred with instinct. I forced myself to proceed slowly down the third aisle, scrutinizing each shelf bay. Nothing appeared disturbed. The shelving units stood immobile. No loose components were apparent. My gaze swept the floor, clear of any stray metal debris. After several minutes of fruitless searching, the sound had vanished entirely. I exited hastily, fumbling slightly with the lock, and drove away, a profound disquiet settling over me for the remainder of the night, my thoughts circling the inexplicable noise. A few evenings later, needing assistance with a fresh delivery of cement bags, I enlisted my friend, Ray. Coordinating after my workday, he met me at my house around 7, and we journeyed to the warehouse together. En route, I recounted the nocturnal peculiarities. He chuckled, suggesting a loose gate or perhaps a metal bracket resonating with the wind. His skepticism made me feel slightly foolish, yet his presence was undeniably reassuring. Upon arrival, we unlocked the door, activated the lights. Everything appeared benign. Shelves stood sentinel. The floor was clear, the air static. We hefted the first 2 sacks inside. As we maneuvered the second bag into position, we both stopped dead. That scraping sound again, unambiguous, loud enough for simultaneous recognition. Ray glanced at me, brow furrowed. "Definitely metal," he confirmed. "You sure there isn't a side door rattling somewhere?" I gestured towards the solid walls. "Just the main entrance. Everything else is sealed tight." We set the cement down. Ray retrieved his phone, activating its flashlight. Together, we advanced cautiously towards the far aisle, the suspected origin point. Our footfalls echoed unnervingly in the cavernous space. Tension coiled between us. My palms grew damp. My heart rate escalated, anticipating something. Reaching the spot, silence descended the moment we arrived. Ray's beam meticulously swept the floor, the shelves, the walls. Nothing out of place. We stood motionless for a minute, listening. No scraping, no squeaks. We experimentally tapped the shelves, scuffed our boots on the concrete, unable to replicate the sound. Ray looked at me, perplexed. "Quiet now. Maybe a loose fixture overhead." We craned our necks towards the humming lights. They appeared securely mounted. The warehouse felt utterly inert. Defeated, we started back towards the entrance. The instant we reached the main door's threshold, the scraping resumed. This time it felt more insistent. A slow, grinding drag across the concrete. A pause, then another drag. Ray and I exchanged wide-eyed glances. Gooseflesh prickled my arms. "Okay, that's not normal," he muttered, his earlier amusement gone. A knot formed in my gut. We both spun around. The sound immediately ceased. We waited, uncertain. Should we investigate again or flee? A powerful urge to simply get out surged through me. My breathing felt shallow, my hands cold. "Let's just verify once more," Ray proposed, though his voice lacked conviction. So, back we walked towards the corridor. Again, stillness upon approach. No movement, no clatter, no rasping. The shelves loomed, implacable. I nudged one with my foot. It remained steadfast. Ray and I looked at each other, a mixture of frustration and unease clouding our faces. We turned to leave. Yet, the instant we pivoted to depart, the sound erupted anew, louder, persistent, echoing through the aisles as if someone were deliberately dragging a heavy chain across the floor right behind us. We both jerked to a stop. Ray swore under his breath. Adrenaline surged through my system, tightening every muscle. I scanned frantically, trying to pinpoint the source, but it seemed omnipresent, resonating from the very structure around us. That was the tipping point. "Right, let's vacate," I declared, the words tight. Ray needed no persuasion. We practically jogged to the truck. I secured the warehouse lock with trembling hands, nearly dropping the key. Once inside the truck's cab, we sat for a moment, catching our breath. Ray shook his head slowly. "Don't know what the hell that is, Leo, but count me out for any more nighttime visits." I nodded mutely. My mind raced, sifting through explanations. Hidden pipes, structural stress, vermin, but none adequately fit the metallic quality, the echoing resonance, or, most disturbingly, its apparent reactivity to our movements. The feeling that it was following us, responding to our presence, was more unsettling than any simple noise. In the ensuing days, my visits were strictly diurnal. Under the sun's scrutiny, the warehouse reverted to its mundane self. The noise never manifested. Shelves remained undisturbed, materials and tools precisely as I'd left them. No evidence of intrusion, the locks inviolate. I even conducted a more thorough inspection of the walls, searching for concealed vents or conduits that might channel strange acoustics at night. Nothing. When consulted, Mr. Henderson feigned surprise, claiming ignorance of any such phenomena. Break the lease, forfeit the deposit. His indifferent offer stood. Unwilling to sacrifice the money, I adopted a new policy. Avoid the warehouse, after dark, especially alone. It felt like the path of least resistance. Ray, however, remained steadfast in his refusal to accompany me again nocturnally. He'd jest about it, but the underlying apprehension was genuine. I couldn't fault him. Sometimes I still try to rationalize it. Steel and concrete structures certainly expand and contract with temperature fluctuations. Perhaps nocturnal cooling triggers resonant sounds, but that fails to account for the localized origin, the distinct scraping character, or the uncanny correlation with my movements, starting and stopping as I approached or retreated. A structural anomaly I've overlooked. Possibly. I've contemplated installing motion-activated cameras with audio recording capabilities, a digital witness, but the resolve falters. I continue utilizing the space for my projects, but strictly within the bounds of daylight. If sunset looms before I can finish, I pack up. The prospect of confronting that sound again, particularly in solitude, holds no appeal. Call it cowardice, but the feeling of being watched, of something unseen reacting to my presence in that cold, echoing space, it's a sensation I actively avoid. My scheduling has become meticulous, ensuring I'm clear of the premises well before twilight. Weeks have passed without hearing the noise. Occasionally, I question the memory, wondering if fear amplified the mundane. But I know what I heard. Ray knows what he heard. I cling to the hope of a simple mechanical explanation, a loose pipe finally revealing itself, an electrical fault diagnosed. Yet, no proof has surfaced. There's no dramatic crescendo to this account, no spectral reveal. Nothing has lunged from the shadows. No trespassers or nesting animals have been discovered amongst the shelves. Still, recalling the way that metallic scraping seemed to track our movements down those sterile aisles sends a chill down my spine. It was real enough to compel two grown men to abandon their task and hasten away. That much is undeniable. Its source, its nature, remains stubbornly elusive. It's just a warehouse, rented for utility, utterly ordinary by day. But after dark, something within scrapes and drags, a sound tethered to the shadows, reactive and inexplicable. I don't comprehend its origin or its mechanism. I only know it exists, and I have no desire to delve deeper into the gloom to uncover its secrets. Safety feels preferable. For now, I maintain my distance when the sun descends, attempting to silence the unsettling echo that lingers, persistent and unresolved, in the back of my mind. A profound stillness took hold the instant I registered those sounds. Low, strangled moans emanating from the sealed room down the corridor. Elsewhere, the house breathed normalcy. Shadows pooled undisturbed in the kitchen. The living room lay dormant. The The familiar, aged buzz of the hallway lamp hummed its usual monotonous tune. But that evening, a subterranean grief seemed to seep from behind that particular door, a sound that raised the fine hairs along my forearms into sharp points. Months had passed since I'd last ventured near that room. Unused, unneeded, I kept it locked, a deliberate act of neglect. Yet these burgeoning sounds, raw and insistent, gnawed at my composure. Compelled, I retrieved my keys. That was the night the chair appeared, planted firmly in the room's center, a stark intrusion into a space I swore contained nothing. Now, merely passing that threshold sends an icy current beneath my skin. Sometimes, the chair seems positioned to face the door, a silent, expectant sentinel. Allow me to unravel this thread by thread, to illuminate the genesis of this disquiet that shadows my steps. This house became mine several years prior. 2 bedrooms, a functional kitchen, a modest living area. Working remotely on occasion, I'd envisioned the spare room as an office, but upon moving in, an invisible resistance met me at its door. The room itself offered no overt menace. Walls of sterile white, cheap tiles cold underfoot, a single window gazing onto the street. Yet stepping across its threshold felt like plunging into a pocket of unnatural chill. Initially, I left the door ajar, but the room's persistent emptiness, its palpable otherness, eventually prompted me to lock it away. The spare key rested, forgotten, in a kitchen drawer until that specific night. It was late, perhaps 11, the television murmuring some forgettable drama in the living room's dim light, when a dull thud resonated through the floorboards. Faint, easily dismissed, perhaps the house settling, or a neighbor's distant activity. Then the sound mutated, blossoming into something akin to muffled weeping, a choked lament. I silenced the television, listening intently. Unmistakably, it originated from the hallway, my hearing strained against the quiet, pulse quickening. A plumbing anomaly, I reasoned feebly, but the sound persisted, erupting in short, strained bursts, like words forced through thick fabric. Rising, I moved with deliberate quiet towards the hallway. The spare room door remained closed, impassive as ever. As I drew nearer, the moaning intensified slightly, a visceral confirmation that sent a wave of cold washing through my chest. My hand closed on the doorknob, locked. A flicker of foolishness. Of course, it was always locked. I lingered, debating the reality of the sounds, the sanity of my fear. Then, a sudden urgency propelled me back to the kitchen. I rummaged through the cluttered drawer, fingers finally closing around the cool metal of the key. Returning to the door, I paused, drew a shallow breath, and inserted the key. The lock yielded with unnerving smoothness. Faintly, the strained sounds continued. Pushing the door inward revealed only darkness, a perfect rectangle of void where the room should be. It appeared empty, precisely as I'd left it. Instantly, the moaning ceased. Silence slammed down, thick and heavy, tightening my chest. My fingers fumbled along the wall, finding the switch. A click, a hesitant flicker, and the overhead light cast a weak, sterile glow. The room was barren, save for one object, a simple wooden chair standing resolute in the exact center. 4 legs, a plain flat back. I knew, with absolute certainty, I had never placed a chair, any furniture, within these walls. Yet there it stood. Rooted in the doorway, I stared, heart hammering against my ribs, breath coming in ragged gasps, waiting. But the room remained inert, silent. No further moans, no creaks, no phantom footsteps. Tentatively, as if fearing to disturb an unseen presence, I stepped inside. The tiles bit at my socked feet with their chill. I circled the chair, scrutinizing it for any clue, any explanation. It seemed utterly mundane. A few scratches marred the seat, the edges worn smooth by time or use. Nothing distinguished it. Reaching out, my fingers brushed the wooden back, smooth but unnaturally cold. My gaze flicked to the window, locked securely from the inside. The entire room, sealed by my own hand from the outside. No one could have simply entered and deposited a chair. The logic fractured, disintegrated. Yet, the conviction remained. I had not put it there. Confusion warred with a rising tide of fear, twisting my insides. I backed away slowly, keeping the chair in my sideline, retreated into the hallway, fumbled for the switch, and plunged the room back into darkness. The door clicked shut. Locking it again, I noted the tremor in my hands. Sleep was a fractured, restless thing that night. The image of the chair burned onto the backs of my eyelids, my ears straining for any recurrence of the sounds. The house, however, remained quiet. Morning light brought a flimsy attempt at rationality. Perhaps I had moved it there, months ago, in a moment of forgotten whim. The thought felt hollow, ridiculous. I tried to dismiss it, yet the unease lingered. Days slipped by. The nights remained silent, but the walk past that door became a trial. The hallway, typically warmed by the afternoon sun, held a distinct pocket of cold near the spare room. Goose flesh prickled my arms each time, urging a faster pace. Then, one morning, heading out for errands, an irresistible compulsion drew me to the door. Keys in hand, heart pounding a nervous rhythm, I hesitated. Did I truly want to confront whatever lay beyond? I convinced myself it was necessary. A reality check. Unlock. Swing open. Light on. The chair remained, but its orientation had shifted. It was now angled slightly, subtly turned towards the doorway, as if its unseen occupant had swiveled to watch my entrance. The change was fractional, yet undeniable. It faced me. I slammed the door shut, the sound echoing unnervously, and fled the house, hands trembling as I locked the front door behind me. My mind churned, grasping for logical straws. Perhaps it was never perfectly aligned, but the feeling persisted, potent and chilling. Something or someone had moved it. Someone had sat there, waiting. I drove aimlessly, errands a mere pretext to escape the house's oppressive atmosphere. The image of the angled chair replayed, tightening the muscles in my neck. Returning later, around 3, sunlight streaming bravely through the living room window bolstered my nerve. Daytime felt safer. I marched to the spare room, unlocked the door, flicked on the light. Still there, still angled towards the threshold. Nothing else disturbed the scene. Window locked, corners empty. No marks marred the floor tiles. Immaculate, except for the defiant presence of the chair and the pervasive sensation of being observed. The hairs on my nape prickled. A sour knot formed in my stomach. I locked the door once more and retreated, seeking solace in the sunlit living room, struggling to regain composure. I began actively avoiding that section of the house, my gaze skittering away from the door whenever I passed. At night, rituals of security intensified, checking locks, peering through windows. Faint, ambiguous noises were rigorously attributed to old pipes or the wind. Some nights, anxiety propelled me from bed to recheck the front door, the back window, seeking reassurance against an unnamed threat. The sheer depth of my fear embarrassed me, yet my body remained coiled, perpetually tense. A week or so later, a new disturbance. Lying in bed, courting sleep, a single, sharp thump echoed from the hallway. Like something solid dropped onto the floorboards, my heart leaped. Rolling onto my side, I stared at my own bedroom door, a barrier against the unseen. Reluctance warred with the need to know. Silently, I crept from bed into the darkened corridor. The spare room door loomed closed. My hand reached for the knob. It felt colder than the surrounding air, an almost icy touch. Turning it confirmed the lock was engaged, precisely as I'd left it. Pressing my ear to the wood yielded nothing. No moans, no thumps, only the profound silence of the house. I retreated to bed, mind racing, sleep utterly banished. The following morning, I called Marcus. Practical, grounded Marcus. I recounted the noises, the inexplicable chair, trying to sound measured, rational. He chuckled, attributing it to stress, an overactive imagination. Come see for yourself, I insisted. He arrived that afternoon. I led him directly to the door, unlocked it. The chair stood within, but now, inexplicably, it seemed returned to its original forward-facing position. Marcus stood in the doorway, arms crossed, skepticism etched onto his features. He entered, circled the chair, inspected the window, tapped the walls, even briefly sat upon the contested object. He found nothing amiss. Mate, it's just a chair, he concluded, clapping my shoulder. Previous owner probably left it. You just forgot. Frustration simmered beneath my surface, the certainty of wrongness clashing with his easy dismissal. I didn't argue. He stayed for a beer. Conversation steered carefully away from the unsettling room. By dusk, he was gone, leaving me alone once more. His visit offered a fleeting calm, but it evaporated the moment I passed the spare room door that night, the familiar wave of cold washing over me. Ignoring it became impossible. Days later, fueled by a mixture of exhaustion and simmering anger, I approached the door again. The key met resistance in the lock, a new grating friction where before there had been smoothness. Finally, it turned. I pushed the door open, hit the light. My breath caught. The chair now faced the wall, its back turned squarely to the door, a gesture of utter rejection. The air hung stale, heavy. A prickling awareness crawled up the back of my neck. Stepping inside, I reached for the chair, intending to drag it back, to impose some order. My palms felt clammy. The instant my hands made contact, a jolt of intense cold shot through me, as if the wood itself were frozen. I flinched back, then, forcing myself, gripped it again. I hauled it towards the window, the scraping of its legs loud in the stillness, placing it deliberately in a new spot. I exited, locked the door, and paced the living room, heart pounding, thoughts chaotic, a volatile mix of fear and fury. A desperate need to find a rational explanation surged. Was someone entering the house? I conducted a meticulous search. Every window latch, every door lock, every conceivable point of ingress, all secure. I even ventured into the dusty, silent attic, Empty. Downstairs again, the house felt utterly normal, benign, except for the palpable wrongness radiating from that single, locked room. That night, I resolved to keep watch. I settled onto the floor in the hallway, directly outside the spare room door, extinguishing the corridor light. Darkness enveloped me. I listened, back aching against the wall, legs cramping, eyes fixed on the faint rectangle of the door. The house offered only the low hum of the refrigerator. An hour passed in fruitless vigil. Nothing. As I finally pushed myself upright, stiff and defeated, a faint soft scrape whispered from the other side of the door, the sound of wood dragging lightly across tile. I froze, hand braced against the wall, breath held captive in my chest. Unlock the door. Check. The impulse died before it formed, choked by a sudden, overwhelming dread. Instead, I retreated to my bedroom, closed the door firmly, and lay in bed, pulse thrumming against the silence. In the week that followed, I avoided opening the door entirely, yet the passage remained unavoidable. Each time, the blast of cold air struck, raising gooseflesh, a physical manifestation of the room's unwelcoming aura. Work suffered, concentration fractured. Conversations felt hollow, shadowed by a secret I couldn't articulate, couldn't ignore. Sleep brought disturbing dreams, finding myself seated in that very chair, in absolute darkness, staring intently at my own bedroom door. I'd wake slick with sweat, the bedside clock invariably showing the dead hour near 3 a.m. Finally, one sunlit morning, resolve hardened by sheer exhaustion and frustration, I decided I would open the door, remove the chair, reclaim the space. Marching down the hall, determination warred with a familiar tightness in my chest. Just a room, I chanted internally. Just a piece of furniture. I turned the key, flicked the switch. The chair faced the door again, but it was closer now, distinctly closer, as if it had shuffled forward during the night, narrowing the gap between itself and the threshold. I stood paralyzed, hand gripping the doorknob, my arm feeling leaden. An unexpected sting of tears blurred my vision. Nerves, frustration, fear. Forcing movement, I walked towards it, grabbed the top rail, pulled. The chair protested with a grating shriek that echoed in the stark emptiness. Heart hammering violently, I dragged it out into the relative safety of the hallway, leaning it against the wall. For a long moment, I stared at it, half expecting unseen hands to snatch it back. Nothing. A ragged exhale escaped me. I looked back into the room. Empty. Utterly empty. No furniture, no boxes, no lurking shadows. Leaving the door ajar, I started back towards the living room. Halfway down the corridor, the cold returned. Not a localized pocket, but a wave washing over my back. I spun around. The spare room door slammed shut with violent finality. A strangled gasp escaped me. My hands flew up, shaking. The chair remained in the hallway, leaning innocently against the wall. It wasn't the chair. Tentatively, I took a step back towards the now closed door, hand outstretched, but the thought of touching the knob again, of opening it, was unbearable. My mouth felt like parchment. My legs threatened to buckle. And so, it remains. The chair rests in the hallway, a displaced object against the wall. I haven't dared to open that door since. The pervasive chill still greets me whenever I pass. Sometimes late at night, I fancy I hear a muffled murmur, but investigation is unthinkable. A constant tension resides in my chest. The memory replays, finding the chair in the darkness, an impossible object in a sealed room. Logically, I should pack, flee this house, but a strange inertia holds me captive. This is my home, or it was meant to be. What lies behind that door now, I cannot say without turning the key again, a prospect that fills me with visceral dread. All I know is the room was tainted from the beginning. I repeat the mantra, an empty space, a single window, nothing more. But the cold is undeniable. The sounds were real. The chair's purposeful repositioning defies explanation. Understanding feels distant, perhaps undesirable. For now, avoidance is my only strategy. That part of the house is ceded territory. Perhaps one day, courage will surface, enough to remove the door itself. Until then, I navigate my own home like a trespasser, sleeping with the lights burning, waiting, always waiting for the sanctuary of morning. A parched throat clawed me from sleep near the dead hour of 2. I surfaced, rubbed the grit from my eyes, and shuffled down the brief corridor toward the bathroom, seeking only water, perhaps a cool splash against my face. But the threshold arrested me. There, gleaming faintly on the tiles, were footprints, wet, slender impressions, small, as if left by narrow feet. Mine were dry. I lived alone. No water had been tracked in. The window stood shut, the door sealed behind me. They simply began. There, before the sink, a sequence leading toward the bathtub. The overhead bulb cast weak, distorted reflections in the damp patches. A prickle of unease traced my spine. Hesitantly, I advanced, careful to step around the marks. I held my breath, straining to hear anything beyond the profound silence of the night, the yawning darkness of the hallway at my back. Nothing stirred. Leaning closer, I saw the trail terminated precisely at the lip of the tub. Expecting dripping water, some source, I peered inside. Dry porcelain gleamed dully back, utterly still. I pivoted, scanning the floor around my own feet, seeking some unnoticed puddle I might have traversed. Nothing. My soles were bone dry. A clammy dampness bloomed on the nape of my neck. Snatching a cup, I filled it hastily from the tap, downed the water in quick gulps, and retreated, leaving the uncanny prints undisturbed. Back in bed, sleep was a distant shore, forgetting, an impossibility. The following night, the thirst returned, rosing me near the same hour. An unlikely recurrence, this nocturnal dryness. Perhaps too much salt at supper, I reasoned, a flimsy shield against rising dread. I padded to the bathroom, halting again at the doorway, transfixed. They were back, wet, catching the low light, the same delicate outlines, but the orientation had shifted, still originating before the sink, still ended near the tub, yet angled differently now, as though their maker had pivoted slightly before taking that final step toward the porcelain basin. Silence held for a moment, then fractured. A sound, incredibly faint, vibrated in the air, a low hum, perhaps, or a muted, tuneless singing. It seemed to emanate from within the room, yet its source remained elusive, directionless. A profound chill seeped into the space, prickling my skin, tightening it across my bones. My heart began a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Reaching out, My fingers grazed the cool, dry surface of the sink. I traced the grout lines on the floor. Only the footprints held moisture. Drawn forward, despite the rising fear, I moved toward the tub. The air grew colder against the back of my neck, goose flesh erupting along my arms. The humming intensified, a knot tightening in my gut. I recoiled, backing out of the room and into the relative safety of my bedroom. Sleep offered no refuge. My thoughts snagged on those inexplicable glistening marks. On the third night, resolve hardened within me. Before surrendering to sleep, I meticulously dried the bathroom floor with a thick towel, ensuring every tile was arid and gleaming. Windows secured, apartment checked. I was solitary, no spare keys dispersed. I set my alarm for 1:30, aiming to preempt the thirst to inspect the room before the usual hour. The alarm's chime dragged me into pre-dawn blackness. I crept down the hall, leaving lights extinguished, then flicked the bathroom switch. They were there, stark against the meticulously dried floor, wet and luminous. Crouching, I extended a fingertip, touching the edge of one print. Cold, not fresh spilled water, but the chill of liquid that had settled. I rubbed my fingers together. Moisture clung to them. Bringing them to my nose, I inhaled. Only the neutral scent of water, devoid of minerals, chemicals, anything distinctive. My own arm hairs prickled, standing erect. Listening intently, the low hum surfaced again, quieter this time, yet persistent. A single, unwavering tone, less melody than a disembodied resonance. I leaned toward the bathtub. The sound swelled, my throat constricted. With a surge of will, I reached out, wrenching back the shower curtain. Empty, dry. My phone's flashlight beam interrogated every corner, revealing nothing but sterile surfaces. Behind me, the footprints remained, silent witnesses. Turning back, I noticed something new. There were fewer prints than before, describing a subtle arc, curving around some invisible obstacle before their terminus at the tub. A hard swallow, a deep breath, and I fled the room, remaining vigilant in my living room armchair until the first gray light of dawn bled through the windows, pondering my next move. Night 4, I laid a trap of wakefulness. Lights off throughout the apartment, I sat sentinel in my bedroom, door ajar, gaze fixed on the sliver of hallway visible. The bathroom door remained slightly open, its light extinguished. Around 2, the silence was punctuated by a soft dripping, water striking tile. After letting minutes stretch taut, I rose, palms slick with sweat. Slowly, cautiously, I moved down the hall, peering into the bathroom's gloom. The floor before the sink shimmered wetly. The prints were discernible, even in the near dark. My hand found the switch. Light flooded the room, and with it, an immediate, palpable draft of cold air against my face. The humming returned, louder now, its pitch subtly altered. As I extended a hand into the room, the threshold crossed. A violent shiver coursed up my spine. My breath hitched, shallow. A dull pulse began to throb at my temple. My mouth felt tacky, words failing me. "Who's here?" I managed, the sound barely a whisper in the charged air. Silence answered, save for the persistent hum. The footprints sat, immutable, leading only to the tub. My reflection stared back from the mirror, pale and strained beneath the stark light. Leaning over the basin, I ran the tap. Normal flow, familiar sound. I splashed water on my face, glanced back down the empty hall, then turned again to the prince. Unchanged. My fingers brushed the tub's rim, dry, cold. Seizing a towel, I knelt and began to wipe at the floor. The terry cloth readily drank the moisture. The footprints dissolved. Holding the damp towel, I waited. The humming ceased. I retreated, sitting on my bed in the darkness until morning arrived. Subsequent nights became a grim series of experiments. I laid down cardboard. It became sodden in two distinct, foot-shaped patches. I scattered flour. It clumped damply where the prints appeared. I placed a fresh, dry towel before the sink. It bore the wet signature by morning. Always the same outcome. Always around that same early hour, heralded by thirst. Always the footprints materializing, bridging the space between sink and tub. Never crossing the threshold from the hall, never originating elsewhere, as if conjured from the very air within the room. Night after night, the pattern shifted, a slight angle to the left one time, veering right the next, sometimes a curve, sometimes almost a straight line, approaching the tub from subtly different vantages. I began to document them, sketching the bathroom layout, marking each print's location, seeking logic in the sequence. A week yielded pages of diagrams, patterns that refused repetition, forming abstract shapes I couldn't decipher. Frustration gnawed at me, coupled with profound fatigue. Sleep became shallow, fractured, leaving behind headaches and knotted muscles. Daylight hours were spent in determined normalcy. Work, television, meals, a facade crumbling each night as apprehension coiled before sleep. The recurring thirst felt less like coincidence, more like a summons back to that unsettling tableau. I considered confiding in a friend, but the words felt ludicrous, impossible to voice without sounding unhinged. I mumbled something about plumbing peculiarities, potential leaks. Check the pipes, call a plumber, came the sensible advice. I did check. By daylight, every pipe, fixture, wall, and ceiling surface was inspected. All sound, dry, and functioning perfectly. One night, steeling myself, I decided on direct confrontation again. Alarm set just shy of 2. Every light in the apartment blazed. Bathroom light on, phone camera recording video. I entered. Initially, the floor remained dry. I stood, vigilantly scanning the tiles, the camera lens my unblinking eye. Time stretched. My legs ached. I leaned against the sink, stifling a yawn. Just as I considered abandoning the effort, the low hum began, vibrating softly in the air. I aimed the camera at the floor. Nothing. I blinked, and they were simply there. Instantly manifest. Wet, slender prints leading to the tub. My heart hammered against my ribs. I filmed, breathing raggedly through my mouth, chest tight. My free hand swept through the air above the prints, a distinct pocket of cold, like an invisible draft. The humming swelled. My gaze flickered to the mirror, the ceiling. Nothing visible. Is someone here? My voice trembled. No reply, only the ceaseless hum. The fine hairs on my arms lifted. Leaning closer, phone held low to capture every glistening detail. I felt that familiar spinal chill intensify. I edged toward the tub. As I neared it, the humming escalated, making my ears thrum. A step back, it subsided. Forward again, it grew stronger. I pointed the camera into the basin. Empty, dry. My hand dipped inside, encountering only cold, smooth porcelain. Heart racing, breath coming in short gasps, I withdrew, panning the camera around the small room, down at my own feet, leaving no trace, then back to those alien, wet marks. Retreating slowly, still recording, I settled onto the living room couch, playing back the video, zooming in. The footprints were starkly clear. Pausing, advancing frame by frame, I scrutinized the footage. Only the prints, the tub, the sterile room. Turning the volume to maximum, the low resonant hum was audible on the recording, but offered no clues. I examined the pattern from that night. Almost a perfect semicircle, ending at the tub's edge. The nights wore on, a cycle of recording, sketching, analyzing, each pattern unique. Curves, zigzags, near straight lines, always sink to tub, never crossing the doorway, never extending beyond the bath. I probed the drain, checked for dampness from below. Logic offered no purchase. The plumbing functioned flawlessly by day. Dread became my nightly companion, lying awake, staring into the darkness, anticipating the alarm, knowing what awaited. My hand would shake, reaching for the light switch. My mouth would parch, thirst or no thirst. Tension seized my back, my shoulders. I tried wearing warmer layers against the chill, but the cold remained, localized, intense near the footprints. Eventually, I ceased my attempts at communication. Whatever it was, it offered no response, left no trace beyond the prints and the hum. Its presence was confined to the bathroom, to that specific nocturnal window. I tried avoiding the room entirely, but the insistent thirst always drove me back. I tried ignoring the prints, darting in for water and fleeing. They remained indifferent. Turning off the light and returning moments later only ensured their reappearance. Leaving a towel down simply meant finding it marked. Nothing deterred them. They never faded on their own, lingering until I physically wiped them away. A silent, persistent insistence on an unseen presence. Weeks bled into months, my nerves frayed thin. I took to leaving the bathroom light burning all night, the door wide open, hoping to glimpse something entering from the hall. I saw nothing. The footprints only ever materialized once I was inside. Often in the instant, I blinked or glanced away. I attempted watching the floor indirectly, using a mirror angled from the hallway. Futile. The moment direct observation ceased, they appeared. It felt deliberate, mocking, yet utterly intangible. My linen closet overflowed with towels bearing the damp stigmata of narrow feet. Hours of video footage documented their instantaneous arrival. The recorded hum remained a flat, inexplicable tone. There was no explanation, no source discovered, no entity revealed. Only the wet footprints on the floor, charting their nightly course from sink to tub, their patterns shifting like cryptic messages, leaving behind a marrow-deep chill that refused to dissipate. I recount this because reason has failed me. I remain in this place. The footprints persist. Each night, the chill embraces me as I cross the threshold. Each night, the low hum vibrates in the air near the tub. I don't understand the why, the what, the meaning of it all. They never cease. They never clarify. I just keep wiping them away, night after night, carrying a sliver of hope that tomorrow the floor will remain dry. But thus far, it never has. It materialized on an October Tuesday, etched into memory by the brutal 14 hours I just wrestled with at the distribution center, my spine a knot of agony from ceaseless lifting. Through the kitchen window, the backyard security flood flared to life as I passed, a stark electric eye opening onto the night. And there it stood, a silhouette, utterly immobile against the tree line where civilization surrendered to woodland. My hand froze, the chipped ceramic mug hovering near my lips. Tall, perhaps 6 feet, a sentinel of stillness wedged in the gloom between 2 skeletal oaks. Features were non-existent. It was like observing a man-shaped void cut clean from the fabric of the world. I lowered the mug, the clink against the counter unnaturally loud. Creeping closer to the window pane, I watched as the shape executed a single, deliberate step backward, dissolving partially into the deeper ink between the trees. A frantic drumming commenced against my ribs. My breath fogged the cold glass as I pressed closer, squinting, straining to resolve the impossible. Long distorted shadows stretched from the floodlight's glare, yet the presence remained definite, half swallowed by the arboreal dark. My phone felt alien in my trembling hand, the heavy-duty metal flashlight, weighty enough to serve as a bludgeon, a cold comfort. The back door lock yielded with a click that echoed my hammering pulse. Autumn's breath, sharp with decaying leaves and damp earth, met my face as I stepped onto the deck, the tread of my work boots thudding against the weathered planks. "Hey!" The sound ripped from my throat, thin and inadequate in the vast quiet. "This is private land." Another step backward from the figure. It was barely discernible now, a concentration of shadow within shadows. I thumbed the flashlight switch, carving a brilliant white arc across the boundary. Nothing. Only tree trunks, drifts of fallen foliage, the empty spaces between. My exhalations plumed white in the chill. Down the deck stairs I went, the flashlight beam jittering with my unsteady gait. Above, the security lamp hummed its monotonous tune, casting a harsh circle of illumination. Beyond its perimeter, the darkness felt absolute, intensified. Halfway across the sodden grass, I halted. Every nerve fiber shrieked a retreat signal. Then, movement again, a subtle drift leftward, always hugging the concealing gloom. My mouth went parchment dry. One more hesitant step forward from me, and it flowed deeper into the woods. The motion was unnervingly smooth, liquid almost. No snap of twig, no rustle of leaves underfoot, just silent, effortless translocation. I retreated slowly, the backs of my calves bumping the lowest deck step, then spun and scrambled inside. The deadbolt slammed home. I twisted the lock twice for good measure before yanking shut every blind. The remainder of the night found me entombed in my recliner, facing the shrouded windows, flashlight resting heavy in my lap. Sleep was a forgotten country. Dawn revealed a lawn slick with dew, yet yielded no evidence, no impressions in the soft earth, no fractured branches, no disturbed leaf litter, nothing to corroborate the night's visitation. Self-doubt gnawed, perhaps exhaustion, an overdose of caffeine, a deficit of rest had conjured the phantom. Then came Wednesday evening, the familiar ritual, punishing shift, protesting muscles, the solace of coffee. I consciously averted my gaze from the kitchen window while nuking a frozen meal, but the magnetic pull of morbid curiosity proved irresistible. I had to look. It was there, Same sentinel posture, same precise location. My plastic dinner tray slipped from numb fingers, clattering against the linoleum. The figure offered no reaction, a Stygian cutout against the sylvan backdrop. This time, the threshold remained uncrossed. I observed it through the glass for indeterminate hours, feeling unseen eyes returning my stare, though none were visible. Thursday bled into Friday, Friday into Saturday. Each night, the apparition materialized at the yard's edge, a constant presence that dissolved upon any approach. My phone camera captured only blurs, amorphous patches of impenetrable dark. A newly installed security camera recorded footage filled with indistinct shadows and digital noise. My neighbor, Mateo, listened with thinly veiled concern. "Probably just a deer, man," he offered, attempting reassurance. "They get spooked by the light, freeze up." But I knew deer. Their movements were terrestrial, their presence announced by sound. This entity moved like drifting smoke and adhered to absolute silence. Sunday saw Officer Dunn arrive, her cruiser parked awkwardly on my gravel drive. She walked the property line, notepad in hand, professional detachment masking the familiar skepticism I'd seen in Mateo's eyes, the unspoken diagnosis of stress-induced delusion. She suggested pruning the trees, admitting more light, speculated about bored teenagers engaging in elaborate pranks, yet teenagers tire. Teenagers giggle, or flee clumsily, or leave muddy tracks. This presence possessed a chilling patience, an unwavering consistency. It had intent, a purpose I couldn't begin to fathom. Sleep deprivation began to erode my performance at work. A dropped crate on Tuesday nearly shattered my foot. My supervisor, exasperated, sent me home. I sat parked in my own driveway for 20 minutes, gaze fixed on the menacing tree line, summoning the courage to enter my besieged home. That night, resolve hardened within me. I would outlast it. Bundled in my heaviest coat, flanked by twin thermoses of black coffee, flashlight poised, phone battery full, I planted a chair on the deck. Sunrise would find me there, if necessary. The security flood ignited at 8:43 p.m. I noted the time on my phone, a futile attempt at imposing order, and there it stood, punctual as always, between the sentinel oaks, a fixture in the 2 weeks since its debut. "What do you want?" My voice, surprisingly steady now, fear calcified into frustrated anger. "Why are you here?" Silence answered. Stillness answered. Only that patient, watching immobility. 11:17 p.m. For the first time, a sound. Soft, dry scraping, like desiccated leaves dragged across rough concrete. The figure subtly shifted, and the horrifying realization struck. The sound originated from it. My knuckles whitened, gripping the flashlight. The scraping intensified. Then, impossibly, it stepped forward, the first advance, not retreat. My heart hammered against my sternum, every muscle coiled, primed for flight. Another step. It cleared the tree line, stood exposed. The floodlight should have rendered it stark, defined, but the darkness seemed intrinsic, clinging, refusing illumination. It was like gazing upon a fissure in reality, a mobile fragment of night itself. The scraping swelled, vibrating in my teeth, filling my auditory world. Another step, then another. It reached the yard's midpoint. I raised the flashlight, thumb hovering over the switch. yet paralyzed by a primal instinct warning against clarity. I didn't want to truly see. The chair scraped backward as I lurched to my feet, legs trembling violently. The figure halted. The scraping noise ceased abruptly, leaving a high-pitched, ringing silence. 20 feet separated us in a tense tableau. Then, an arm began to lift. The motion was fundamentally wrong. Too fluid, unfolding at impossible angles, like time-lapse footage of botanical growth played in reverse, but imbued with sinister intent. The limb extended, elongating impossibly, stretching across the grass toward me. I bolted, slammed the door, fumbled with the lock, fled upstairs, collapsing against my bedroom wall, lungs burning, gasping. No windows were approached for the remainder of that night. The following morning, feigning illness, I skipped work. The day became a frantic campaign against shadow, installing additional floodlights, hacking back undergrowth, trimming low-hanging branches, more cameras, motion sensors, even a high-voltage electric fence system were purchased and deployed. Futile gestures. It appeared that night, undeterred, in its designated spot, despite the amplified light and denuded landscape. Cameras captured only static snow. Motion sensors remained dormant. The electric fence might as well have been decorative wire, but a shift had occurred. Now, it would periodically advance, always stopping halfway, always raising that grotesque, impossible arm, only retreating when I sought refuge indoors or averted my gaze. My life inverted. Sleep claimed the daylight hours. Nights became vigils. Blackout curtains shrouded my bedroom. Caffeine pills became sustenance. Spreadsheets tracked its appearances, movements, the evolution of its disturbing sounds. Understanding became an obsession, a pattern, a motive, anything to anchor it to reason. Week 3 brought termination. Too many absences, too many costly errors. Mateo's check-ins ceased. Officer Dunn stopped returning my calls. The abandonment was understandable. I heard the frayed edges in my own voice. Each night, the figure grew bolder, encroaching further before its customary withdrawal. The scraping sound intensified, layering, sometimes hinting at phonemes, whispers in a language utterly alien. Outside became forbidden territory. Groceries were delivered. Blinds remained drawn. Yet its presence was palpable, a heavy weight pressing against the house, waiting. The air within grew thick, stagnant. The walls seemed to inch closer daily. 4 weeks culminated in fracture. Sleep deprivation, profound isolation, and unrelenting terror had ground me down to raw nerve. At 3 a.m., slumped on the kitchen floor, the ceaseless scraping a torment against my eardrums, a decision crystallized. This stalemate had to break. Flashlight and coat became my armor. I stepped onto the deck. The figure occupied its usual station, the aberrant arm already commencing its unnatural ascent. A deep breath, then forward, across the damp grass. It did not retreat. The scraping crescendoed with each step. My ears popped, vision tunneled, blurring at the periphery. But onward, I marched. 10 feet. Details began to resolve, though my mind recoiled, refusing comprehension. The darkness wasn't merely clinging. It was the figure, flowing, coalescing like black water defying gravity. 5 feet. The arm stretched, impossibly jointed, reaching. The scraping consumed all sensory input. Warmth trickled from my nose. Blood. 3 feet. 2. 1. I stopped, raised the flashlight, thumb finding the switch. The figure lowered its arm. The scraping noise sheared off into profound silence. And in that vacuum, I heard breathing, not from the entity before me, but from behind. Slowly, I turned. Another figure stood upon my deck, identical to the first, its arm lifted. Simultaneously, another emerged from behind a maple to my left. Another materialized beside the garden shed. More coalesced along the tree line. 2, 5, a dozen. Each an impossible silhouette, each extending an arm towards the center. I stood frozen, encircled by darkness-given animate form. The flashlight slipped from nerveless fingers, thudding softly onto the grass. The figures took a single, synchronized step inward. Another. The scraping resumed, now polyphonic, emanating from all directions. A chorus of dead leaves, rough concrete, and something else. Something voracious. I squeezed my eyes shut, felt the displacement of air as those elongated limbs reached, and waited for the inevitable. Elias! Hey, Elias! Mateo's voice, a jarring intrusion. A car door slammed nearby, followed by footsteps crunching on gravel. My eyes flew open. The yard was empty, bathed in the sterile glare of the security lights. Mateo stood at the side gate, clutching a paper bag. Brought dinner, he called out. You weren't answering your phone. Got worried, man. My gaze swept the perimeter. No shadows moved unnaturally. Only the chirping of crickets and the distant hum of traffic remained. Come inside, I managed, my voice sounding reedy, unfamiliar. It's not safe out here after dark. Mateo shot me a peculiar look, but complied. I secured the door behind him, checking the lock twice. You look like hell, he observed, unpacking containers fragrant with ginger and soy. When did you last sleep? I didn't answer, moving instead to the kitchen window, drawing the blinds tight. Looking wasn't necessary. I knew they were out there, patient in the shadows, waiting for solitude to reclaim me. Mateo stayed for 2 hours. We ate. We spoke of trivialities, his job, the local team's prospects, his daughter's science fair project. He tactfully ignored my involuntary flinches at every nocturnal sound. When he finally departed, I escorted him to his car, standing sentinel in the driveway until his taillights vanished around the bend. Then, retreating inside, locking everything, I began to pack. The next morning, I phoned my sister, Clara, in Arizona. A spare room awaited, she confirmed. Sunshine was abundant there, she promised. Few trees, scant shadows for concealment. Movers were hired. Most furniture was abandoned. I drove west, the car crammed with essentials, refusing the rearview mirror until Ohio dissolved into the states behind me. Months have passed. My current residence is an apartment complex, stark concrete and sun-baked stucco. East-facing windows greet the desert dawn. I work daytime hours at another warehouse, sleep often with the lights blazing. Occasionally, I scan the online news from my hometown, searching for reports of disappearances, of strange sightings near the property I fled. Nothing surfaces. New owners occupy the house now. The urge to call, to warn them, arises, but the futility, the inherent madness of the story, silences me. Perhaps it was merely a product of my own unraveling. Stress, exhaustion, isolation, conjuring demons from mundane shadows. My therapist suggests as much. She's likely correct. Yet, I avoid the outdoors after nightfall, and sometimes, drifting in the liminal space before sleep, a faint sound reaches me, disturbingly familiar, a dry, scraping cadence, like dead leaves skittering across concrete, seemingly originating just beyond my window. The blinds remain firmly closed. I cultivate ignorance. I refuse to know if anything waits outside, reaching with arms too long. I refuse to know if they followed. I refuse to know if they are still waiting. The inaugural chant insinuated itself through the pre-dawn chill, a sibilant whisper that coiled around my awareness, tightening like ice. Motionless within my sleeping bag, I listened, the frantic drumming in my chest nearly drowning out the external sound. Again, it came, a low, rhythmic pulse, guttural and ancient, seeming to emanate from the very soil beneath us, from the air itself. This tranquil forest night had fractured, revealing something profoundly wrong, something predatory lurking just beyond the veil of the ordinary. We had sought refuge here, my closest companions, Liam and Chloe and I. Months we'd anticipated this escape, 3 souls in our late 20s, yearning for respite from the city's relentless thrum. The allure of untamed air, panoramic heights, and star-dusted nights had proven too potent. We'd selected a secluded enclave, deep within the national forest, deliberately distant from frequented trails. The trek inward tested our limits, but gifted us a clearing cradled by colossal pines. Our first day unfolded like a dream. Vigorous hikes, plunges into a lake of startling clarity, tales spun beside the leaping flames of our campfire. But as the second day bled into night, the dream curdled. The chanting began sometime past midnight's turning point. At first, a phantom of my subconscious, yet wakefulness brought stark confirmation. It was a sound utterly alien, neither recognizable language nor conventional melody, but a terrifying confluence that prickled my skin. Unzipping my tent with practiced stealth, I peered into the moon-washed clearing. Liam stood already, his features stark and blanched in the argent glow. "You hear it too," he breathed, eyes wide with disbelief. A silent nod was my only reply. My voice felt trapped. Chloe emerged moments later, hugging herself against a sudden, inexplicable chill. "What is that?" Her voice, usually steady, wavered. "It feels everywhere." As if summoned, the sound swelled, amplifying. Distinct voices now, a chorus chanting in unnerving unison. The syllables, if indeed they were such, belonged to no tongue known to me. They resonated deep within my sternum, accelerating my heart, stealing my breath into shallow, panicked sips. "We should see what it is," Liam proposed, ever the one to court the unknown. "Are you serious?" Chloe hissed, her fear palpable. "Haven't you absorbed anything from horror stories? This is precisely the prelude to disaster." My own instinct screamed agreement with Chloe, yet a morbid curiosity warred with primal terror. What if someone required aid? What if we'd intruded upon some sacred local rite? "Listen," I mediated, forcing a calm I didn't possess. "A quick reconnaissance. Just a look. Anything feels wrong, we retreat instantly. Break camp. Agreed?" Reluctantly, consensus was reached. Armed with flashlights and grasping hiking poles, like flimsy talismans, we ventured toward the chant's perceived epicenter. Night had transformed the familiar woods into a labyrinth of shifting darkness. Phantoms capered at the edge of our flashlight beams. Each twig snap elicited a collective flinch. The chanting intensified with our approach, a sinister beacon drawing us deeper into the arboreal maze. Perhaps 15 minutes into our strained pilgrimage, a flickering luminescence bled through the dense trees ahead. We extinguished our lights, relying on the moon's ghostly illumination to guide our final, cautious steps. The tableau revealed in the clearing beyond is seared into my memory, a recurring nightmare projected onto the screen of my closed eyelids. Figures, swathed in dark, voluminous robes, formed a circle around a massive, horizontal slab of stone. Their faces remained obscured within the cavernous depths of their hoods. Upon the stone, horrifyingly, lay what appeared to be a human silhouette, its details lost in the capricious dance of firelight nearby. The chanting reached its zenith, a visceral, throbbing sound that reverberated among the ancient trees. One robed figure detached from the circle, elevating a polished object that glinted wickedly. A cold shock jolted through me. It was unmistakably a blade. "We have to leave," I whispered, the words sharp with urgency. "Right now." But our retreat was forestalled. The chanting ceased, plunging the woods into a silence more terrifying than the sound itself. Then, with chilling synchronicity, every hooded head swiveled, fixing upon our hiding place. "Run!" Liam's shout shattered the stillness, all caution abandoned. We bolted, crashing blindly through the undergrowth, branches lashing our faces. Behind us, the sounds of pursuit erupted, heavy, thudding footsteps and guttural cries that scraped the boundary between human and beast. My lungs burned, muscles screamed, but sheer terror propelled me. In the frantic darkness, I lost sight of Liam and Chloe, my entire being consumed by the imperative to escape. A treacherous root snagged my boot. I fell hard, the impact expelling the air from my lungs. Gasping, struggling to rise, an iron grip seized my ankle. I lashed out blindly with my free foot, connecting with something yielding yet solid. A sharp grunt of pain, a momentary loosening of the hold. Enough. I scrambled free, fueled by a fresh surge of adrenaline, running until collapse was inevitable. I found refuge behind the bulk of a fallen giant, heart hammering violently against my ribs, certain its frantic rhythm would betray me. There I lay, breath held captive, straining for any sound of pursuit. Minutes stretched into an eternity, morphing slowly into an hour. Gradually, the forest's natural nocturne returned. An owl's query, the furtive rustling of unseen creatures. But of Liam, of Chloe, there was nothing. As the adrenaline ebbed, the chilling immensity of my predicament settled. Alone, lost in the wilderness, devoid of supplies, ignorant of which direction offered salvation. And somewhere within these shadowed woods, the architects of that monstrous ritual might still be searching. I remained hidden until the first tentative rays of dawn painted the sky. Every elongated shadow seemed poised to strike. Every natural sound sent jolts of fear through me. Yet stillness meant surrender. I had to find help, to report the horror we had witnessed. It was deep into the afternoon when I finally stumbled upon a marked hiking trail. An hour later, exhaustion warring with desperation, I encountered a group of day hikers. My disheveled state and fragmented, frantic narrative spurred them to contact the park rangers. The search for Liam and Chloe spanned days. Our campsite was located untouched, save for bizarre sigils carved deeply into the bark of adjacent pines. But my friends had vanished without a trace. When the rangers eventually located the clearing from my description, it was barren. No altar stone, no fire remnants, nothing to substantiate my tale beyond trampled vegetation and more of those unsettling symbols etched into the trees. Endless hours were spent with law enforcement, federal agents, recounting the night's events with painstaking detail. Skepticism radiated from them. Without corroborating witnesses, without tangible proof of the cult, the unspoken conclusion hung heavy in the air. I was either delusional or complicit. 5 years have dissolved since that night. Liam and Chloe remain ghosts, officially catalogued as missing, presumed victims of the wilderness, perhaps an animal attack, perhaps a fatal misstep. Only I carry the weight of the truth. Sometimes, in the profound quiet of late hours, I fancy I hear it again, that insidious chanting carried on the wind. I've relocated thrice, yet the feeling persists, a phantom echo. I coexist now with the gnawing fear, the unshakable sensation of being perpetually observed. More corrosive than fear, however, is the insidious doubt. Was the ritual real, or did trauma birth a grotesque hallucination to mask a simpler, yet equally devastating accident? I've immersed myself in the shadowed lore of cults, esoteric faiths, forbidden practices, online forums, support networks for those brushed by the inexplicable. These have become my refuge, my research library. Slowly, fragments coalesce into a terrifying mosaic. What I encountered, what claimed Liam and Chloe, transcended the merely human. The sigils, the chant, the ritual itself, all whisper of something far older, entities that slumber in the world's dim corners, awaiting invocation. Camping is a pleasure I no longer permit myself. The wilderness, once a sanctuary, now feels menacing. Yet sometimes, gazing from my window at trees silhouetted against the night sky, their branches swaying, a chilling question arises. Are they merely trees, or something else entirely? Watching, waiting, poised to reclaim me for that abyss of terror. One certainty remains. Realms exist beyond our fragile comprehension, and ignorance can be a profound mercy. For once that veil is torn, retreat is impossible. The knowledge becomes a haunting, a transformation, leaving you forever scanning the shadows, forever wondering when they will return. So, should you find yourself deep in the woods as darkness reigns, and a sound like chanting reaches your ears, resist the urge to investigate. Quell the impulse toward heroism. Simply turn and flee. Run without pause, without looking back, because some sights, once witnessed, burn themselves irrevocably upon the soul, and some rituals once commenced ripple outward, forever seeking completion. The memory clings, sharp as the sound that first splintered the night's profound stillness. I lay suspended in the dark, eyes fixed on the unseen ceiling, the street outside a muted ribbon of asphalt and slumber. Then it came, a single, abrasive bark that sliced through the quiet, instantly coiling tension low in my gut. I remained utterly motionless, breath held captive, listening for an echo, a confirmation. A minute stretched thin, then another yelp pierced the air, distant, yet disquietingly close. Perhaps from the dense shrubbery flanking the fence, perhaps the narrow alley hugging the garage. Impossible to pinpoint. I courted oblivion, willing my eyes shut, coaxing my breath into slow, even tides. But the sound returned, again and again, a grating, intermittent pulse against my eardrums. Frustration simmered, yet inertia held me fast. That first night, I surrendered, waiting only for the gray promise of dawn. The following evening, I sought refuge in early sleep, hoping unconsciousness might grant immunity. A futile wish. Around the familiar hour, just past midnight's threshold, the barking commenced its broken rhythm. Not a constant barrage, but bursts punctuating the silence. A bark, sometimes a quick pair, a pause pregnant with anticipation, then another solitary cry. My gaze drifted to the window, a pale rectangle in the gloom. Should I rise? Confront some phantom stray? The thought repelled me. A midnight entanglement I craved less than the sleep it stole. Yet, the irritation grew teeth. 30 minutes dissolved into this acoustic torment before I dragged a pillow over my head, a pathetic attempt to muffle the intrusion. Useless. The urge to fling open the sash and roar into the darkness warred with a primal reluctance to expose myself, to invite unknown attention. What if it belonged to a neighbor? Disputes were poison. So, silence reigned within, while the barking persisted without. 3 hours of fractured rest were my meager reward. By the third night, exhaustion had laid claim. My eyes felt like sandpaper. A stubborn ache had settled in my neck. Movement felt sluggish, my head a leaden weight. This time, I embraced the vigil, sitting sentinel in the darkness, waiting. And it came, punctual as ever. Rising, I padded barefoot to the kitchen, eased the back door open a mere sliver, and listened. The sound was undeniably closer now, perhaps just beyond the weathered planks of the fence, or nestled near the corner of the small utility shed. From a drawer, I retrieved a heavy torch, listened again. Silence hummed. Then, another bark, seemingly shifted, further left. I stepped onto the cold kiss of the concrete stoop, the night air raising gooseflesh on my bare arms, clad only in a thin shirt and sweats. The torch beam sliced into the darkness, sweeping the fence line. Nothing. I clicked it off, plunging back into shadow, waiting. The bark erupted once more. Canine, yes, but fundamentally wrong. A low, guttural quality resonated beneath it, a roughness that scraped along my nerves, unsettling me deeply. I retreated, the deadbolt sliding home with a definitive click, and remained in the kitchen's dim sanctuary until sunrise bled through the window. Perhaps 2 hours of sleep followed. Night 4 arrived, and with it, the end of my patience. Enough. I would venture out, probe the perimeter, crawl through the undergrowth if necessary. Preparations began early. Durable jeans, sturdy boots, a jacket laden with pockets, and the powerful torch. I waited for the signal, the familiar jagged bark. When it sounded, I moved with deliberate stealth, muffling the click of the latch, the groan of the gate hinge. Into the backyard I slipped, letting my eyes adjust before risking the light. A long moment I stood, straining my ears. Was that breathing, faint and raspy, or merely the wind sighing through unseen leaves? A bark, sharp and immediate, from directly behind the fence. The torch flared to life. I slipped through the side gate onto the narrow verge separating my property from a neglected patch of wilderness. Weeds, wild grasses, skeletal brush. A distant street lamp cast long, weak shadows, leaving this strip largely untouched by light. My beam interrogated the ground, searching for paw prints, any telltale sign. Flattened grass marked a recent resting spot. I swept the light slowly, methodically, across the tangled darkness. A rustle, the unmistakable sound of weight shifting on dry detritus. The beam snapped towards the origin. Something crouched there, too large, surely, for any stray I knew. It hugged the earth, yet the silhouette of its head and shoulders seemed distorted, alien. I couldn't discern fur. Its hide, caught in the glare, appeared grayish, or perhaps just lusterless, dull. It turned its head, slowly, deliberately. Its eyes caught the light, but not with the familiar bright flare of a nocturnal animal. These were opaque pools, reflecting dimly, unevenly. No word escaped my lips. I didn't advance. My heart hammered against my ribs, sweat beaded on my forehead. My grip tightened on the torch. The creature emitted a soft, low noise, not quite a growl, more a guttural expiration of air. Then it barked. The sound jolted me, forcing an involuntary step back. It didn't flee. It remained low, observed me, its posture radiating an unnerving stillness. I registered the wrongness of its form. The limbs seemed disproportionately long, the hind legs bent at an unnatural angle. I tried to sharpen the focus, but the creature shifted, sliding sideways with an unnerving fluidity, still hugging the ground, before melting behind a dense clump of taller grasses. I stood frozen for a minute, maybe two, enveloped by the night's ambient sounds, distant traffic hum, the electric thrum of the far-off lamp, the ragged rhythm of my own breathing. No more barks disturbed the quiet. Eventually, I killed the torch beam and retreated to the perceived safety of my yard. The gate clicked shut behind me. Inside, I sank into a living room chair, profoundly unsettled. What was that? Not merely a dog, something else entirely. And I had no earthly idea what to do. The following day was a blur of forced concentration and bitter coffee. The image of the crouching thing haunted the edges of my thoughts. A desperate urge to confide, to share the burden, warred with the certainty of disbelief, ridicule. Who would take such a story seriously? I swallowed the words, telling myself it was just a deformed dog, perhaps sick, injured, and trick of the light, an odd angle. But a deeper conviction resonated. It was not right. That night, the house became a blacked-out observation post. I extinguished every light, positioning myself on the floor by the back door, ear pressed against the cool wood, listening. Punctually, the barking began. I sprang up, snatching the torch, and, on impulse, a heavy wrench from a nearby shelf. Outside again, creeping along the fence line, striving for silence. The rustling came sooner this time. I threw the beam instantly into the brush. Movement flickered, indistinct. As I edged towards the chain-link barrier, the creature partially rose. For a fleeting second, it seemed to lever itself upward on its hind legs, before dropping back to all fours. Definitely not animalian in any conventional sense. The shape was aberrant. The front limbs possessed an unnerving length, the head strangely formed. I caught a glimpse of a face, flat, pale. The mouth opened, revealing sharp, irregular teeth. It barked again, the sound strained. as if mimicking a noise it had only heard, lacking the organic resonance of a true bark. I stood rooted, the wrench a cold weight in my hand, heart pounding a frantic tattoo. Crossing the fence, closing the distance. Unthinkable. The creature paced restlessly behind the screen of grass, its outline shifting, phantom-like. Its breathing was audible now, a heavy, rasping cadence. A peculiar odor drifted on the air, damp earth and decaying leaves, underscored by a faint, cloying hint of rot. The instinct to flee screamed, yet a morbid curiosity held me captive. What was it? I took a hesitant step closer, directing the full intensity of the torch beam upon it. The creature flinched, recoiling several steps. In that moment, I saw what looked like loose folds of skin around its neck, or perhaps uneven tufts of sparse fur. It opened its mouth again, baring its teeth in a silent snarl, followed by another short, sharp bark. I advanced another step. It reacted instantly, moving with surprising speed, laterally, dissolving into the unlit depths. I heard the crashing passage through bushes, then nothing. Back inside, doors secured, I collapsed onto a kitchen chair, a fine tremor running through me. My throat was parched. I poured water from the tap, drinking slowly, deliberately, trying to quell the frantic pulse still racing beneath my skin. What name could encompass such a thing? It wore the guise of a distorted animal, yet moved with an unsettling hint of something else. Its bark felt like a performance, a hollow imitation. Why here, night after night? Was it searching for sustenance? Had it wandered from the untamed land beyond the developed lots? Yet local lore held no tales of strange beasts. This was a neighborhood of modest homes, fenced yards, predictable routines. Over the ensuing nights, my tactics varied. I tried utter stillness, peering through minuscule gaps in the fence boards. Once, I glimpsed its back, a hunched spine, patches of thin, dark hair clinging to pale, unhealthy-looking skin. It continued its intermittent barking, as if calibrating the sound, testing its effect. I tried whistling softly. No reaction. I tossed a small stone into the brush. It merely crouched lower, wary but seemingly unafraid. It never breached my boundary, always remaining just beyond the fence. The barking adhered to its schedule, commencing around midnight, lasting an hour or two in sporadic bursts, then ceasing. I never witnessed its departure. The sound simply stopped, leaving me to wonder if it had slipped away unheard or remained motionless, waiting for me to abandon my vigil. Paranoia began to weave its tendrils around me. Old blankets became window shrouds, blocking any betraying interior light. My phone screen was dimmed to its lowest setting. I yearned to catch it off guard, to see it clearly, just once. But each encounter yielded only fragments, a fleeting shape, a hint of that pallid face, the disturbing outline of limbs too long, too jointed. Did I imagine fingers clutching a branch for balance? The notion of it possessing hands sent a fresh wave of revulsion through me. After a week besieged, sleep-deprived, and raw-nerved, I considered seeking help. But who? Animal control wouldn't respond at night for anything less than an emergency. The police? Reporting a strange animal. Laughter felt like the most probable response. My neighbors remained distant acquaintances. Confiding in them risked being labeled eccentric, unstable. The burden remained solely mine. Sleep became a daytime pursuit, snatched in fragmented naps after work, hoarding alertness for the nightly siege. One evening, inspiration struck. A motion-activated light, battery-powered, positioned near the fence line. Perhaps surprise would force a clearer revelation. Midnight arrived, heralded by the familiar grating bark. I waited inside, lights off, observing through a narrow parting in the curtains. A few barks echoed, followed by rustling. Then the motion light flared, bathing the area in stark, sudden illumination. For a precious second, the creature was fully visible. It stood on all fours, spine sharply arched. Its skin looked coarse, diseased, patchy. Thin hair sprouted along its shoulders. Its head was turned towards my fence. I saw the face clearly now, a flattened nose above a wide mouth filled with uneven teeth. The eyes were small, dark, inscrutable pits. It jerked its head towards the light source, startled perhaps by its sudden appearance. Awkwardly, it backed away. I saw its front limbs bend like elbows, unmistakably arm-like. The back legs bent like a human's, in a deep crouch, not the hocks of a dog. It lowered itself swiftly, vanishing once more beyond the light's reach. The realization struck with visceral force. This was no mere animal aberration. Its movements were too unnatural, its bark too studied. Nausea churned in my stomach. My hands trembled violently. I retreated to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face, feeling the damp chill of sweat under my clothes. I listened intently. After the motion light timed out, a few more barks sounded, weaker now, hesitant. Then, profound silence descended. The next day, the thought of escape tantalized. A friend's couch, a cheap motel, but flight felt like surrender. A deeper need gnawed at me, the need to understand. That night, when the barking began, I retaliated with sound. Flinging open the back door, I yelled, "Hey!" My voice, loud and sharp, aimed for anger. A momentary pause in the barking. "Go away!" I shouted into the darkness. Silence stretched. Then the barking resumed, softer this time. I retrieved a length of metal pipe from the garage and struck it repeatedly against the fence, the clang echoing harshly. The barking ceased abruptly. I heard movement, a retreat into the brush, then stillness. I waited a long time. The barking did not return that night. A fragile hope flickered. Perhaps I had finally driven it off. It was short-lived. The following night, the barking returned, undeterred. I repeated my sonic assault, shouting, banging the pipe. This time, it persisted, the intermittent cries continuing unabated. Torch in hand, I went out again, scanning the darkness beyond the chain link. I spotted it several yards back, behind dense shrubbery. It was sitting almost upright, one hand-like limb grasping a low branch for support. It barked once more, a defiant sound. "Leave me alone," I yelled, my voice cracking with fatigue and frustration. It turned its head slightly, regarded me for a moment, then flowed away, crawling on all fours until swallowed by the night. In the days that followed, I tried resignation. Earplugs offered little defense against the insidious bark. Quiet music was merely drowned out. Sleep remained elusive, captured in brief, unsatisfying bursts. The routine became grimly familiar. Listen, wait, endure, or venture out for another fleeting, disturbing glimpse. No definitive tracks ever appeared. No scat, no shed fur, only the crushed grass, and occasionally disturbed earth. Eventually, the frantic need for answers subsided, replaced by a weary acceptance. I stopped trying to understand the creature beyond the fence. It never attacked, never crossed the boundary into my yard. It simply existed out there, a nocturnal anomaly, barking its strange, forced cries, revealing itself only under duress. Driving it away felt futile. The barking continued, night after night. I learned to function on fragments of sleep, to endure the bone-deep fatigue. My thoughts still circle back to it, to the damp earth smell, the hunched silhouette, the unsettling mimicry of a bark. What does it want? Why my fence line? Questions without answers. I only know it remains. So, the flashlight stays within reach. The doors remain double locked, and I wait, night after night, for the reprieve of sunrise.